Anytime.
John.
All right, First Lady Melania Trump re-emerging last night at a White House event for Gold Star families that was closed to the press. The First Lady's been out of the public eye for 24 days after undergoing a medical procedure. Our Kate Bennett live in Washington with the very latest on this. People were wondering, where was the First Lady, Kate?
Everyone was wondering. 24 days is quite a long time. And yesterday's event for Gold Star families at the White House wouldn't be such a big deal. It's something very sort of normal for a First Lady to attend. But when we hadn't seen her, all eyes were on her. Even the president joked last night at this event about the "Where's Melania" memes that had sort of popped up on the internet after her disappearance from public view. And he said there were even jokes that, did she leave him? Did she leave him? And she's right here in the front row. Sort of an awkward moment considering the setting and Gold Star families. However, this is certainly something that the White House is saying the media has added fuel to the fire of these Melania jokes. Certainly, I spoke to Melania Trump spokesperson Stephanie Grisham yesterday, and she told me in a statement, Mrs. Trump has always been a strong and independent woman who puts her family and certainly her health above all else, and that won't change over a rabid press corps. She's confident in who she is, what she is doing, and in her role, and knows the rest is just speculation and nonsense. Now, I would argue that it's not just the media. In fact, most of the country was wondering where their First Lady was. Right, left, center, everyone was sort of speculating after the disappearance of Melania for such a long period of time. However, she is independent. This is a First Lady who calls the shots. She did have a medical procedure that kept her in the hospital for 5 days. We hope she's doing better. We expect to see her have a more public schedule in the weeks to come.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Kate. And why are we the bad guys for wondering about her health and wondering if she's okay? So anyway, it was good to see her, and she looks well. So thank you, Kate, for the update there.
Sure.
Okay, meanwhile, the devastation in Hawaii is intensifying this morning. There's fast-moving lava. It's pouring into the ocean, and that creates hazardous conditions. So we have a live report for you next.
It is a huge political day, primaries in 8 states, including California. And it is California that could make or break Democrat dreams of taking back the House. The election rules there, though, in crowded fields, giving Democrats major headaches. CNN's Miguel Marquez live in Huntington Beach, California. Good morning, Miguel.
Good morning to you, John. 8 states, indeed, going to the polls today in those primary elections, and Democrats hope to turn the House Democratic in November. But to do that, they will have to win in places like this, Orange County, California. And California has a very unique primary system here. It's a jungle primary where only the top 2 advance regardless of party, so an open primary system. And the problem Democrats have here, while they have great support, they may suffer from too much enthusiasm. Are you with me? Yeah! California Democrats buoyant, counting on a November blue wave and flipping several congressional seats here from Republican to Democratic.
If a Democrat is on the ballot in November, what happens?
I think if a Democrat is on the ballot in November, a Democrat wins.
But California has a jungle primary, meaning only the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election in November.
The fear is just that the vote gets so split that no Democrat beats a Republican.
In Orange County and adjacent, an astounding 45 candidates are running for just 3 seats. So many are well-funded, well-organized Democrats, raising the prospect the Democratic vote could be split so much that only Republicans would then advance to the November ballot.
You were running in this district. Why'd you drop out?
I dropped out because we had too many candidates running at the time.
I withdrew from the race, and not only withdrew from the race, but decided to get behind the strongest candidate who I believe can win.
Janowitz and Oatman are 2 of 9 Democrats withdrawing from the 3 races, hoping to narrow the field and improve the chances of the remaining 15 Democratic candidates.
Democrats and Harley Ruda moving us forward.
And national Democrats, the DCCC, weighing in, spending millions in advertising in English and Spanish, a rarely used tactic as they try to ensure a Democrat is on the ballot in every race come November.
DCCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So worried, national Democrats are even running attack ads against some Republican candidates in all 3 districts.
trying to dampen Republican turnout by criticizing GOP candidates for voting like Democrats.
We're going to have a tough primary on June 5th.
Harley Ruda in California 48 is in a unique category, winning support from both the establishment, DCCC, and activist groups like Indivisible.
All the different aspects of the party are getting behind this campaign, and hopefully that will propel us to the general.
Thank you! Democrats here will need more than hope.
So we can count on your vote June 5th.
Gil Cisneros in the 39th is banking on enormous Democratic turnout to make the difference on primary day.
If we can get those Democrats out to vote, and I think it's going to carry over, I think we're going to see good results.
Maybe. Absentee ballots in the 3 Orange County districts so far show more Republicans than Democrats voting.
So will they vote? That is the big question. We know that those absentee and mail-in ballots are up over 2014. They are down from 2016. And typically in a primary off-year election like we have today, Democrats don't turn up in big numbers. That may spell trouble for them. Allison?
Miguel, this is fascinating. It'll be fascinating to watch the outcome here. Thank you very much for setting all of that up for us. Okay, so at least 117 homes have now been destroyed by the fast-moving lava from the Kilauea volcano on Hawaii's Big Island. So residents are being warned about that potential deadly mix that we've told you about of lava and haze that pollute the air. And CNN's Scott McLean is live in Hilo with more. What's the situation, Scott?
Hey, Allison. Well, over the past month, there have been nearly 10,000 earthquakes around the Kilauea volcano. But for most of the people who live in that area, an earthquake is really the least of their worries. There is a stream of molten lava tearing across part of this island you mentioned. Well over 100 homes have been destroyed already, and that number is likely to rise quickly. Helicopters search overhead looking for anyone stranded in the latest area in the path of lava from the Kilauea volcano. 4 people were airlifted out of the area over the weekend. Most others had left long ago. From the water, it's easy to see where lava has started to hit the ocean.
That is unreal. Can you see that?
Violent explosions turned to pure white smoke called laze, potentially deadly mixture of gas, steam, and tiny bits of glass. The entire lava flow is a half-mile wide, with hundreds of homes in its path, caught between the lava and its final destination, right here in the Pacific. From the air, video from the U.S. Geological Survey shows the lava's path as smoke billows overhead, cutting a path through homes and neighborhoods. The darker smoke burning homes that have already fallen prey. The lighter smoke is laze.
Even from where we are, about 7 or 8 miles away, you can see that massive fissure in the distance that has created this massive flow of lava that has stretched for miles all the way down to the ocean.
On land, the flames from the lava reducing homes to charred remains. This video shows the power of the volcano felt by people like Luana Jones, who lost her home last week further inland. The unforgiving lava swallowing anything it touches.
There was love there, you know, and I kissed my house goodbye when I left. I really did. You could feel the love in the walls.
The home where she used to entertain and raise her family engulfed in flames. But Jones says her faith and community will survive.
It's just a house, yeah. It's just a house. We can rebuild the house, but our home is Puna.
But the geography of this island paradise will be changed forever as Mother Nature continues to run its course.
You can't see it through the smoke, but there's actually a bay behind there, maybe a couple hundred yards deep. As the lava enters the ocean, it builds up, and before Kilauea is all said and done, that bay may be entirely filled in.
Now, authorities don't have a good estimate on the number of people who are stranded because they chose to stay in the isolated area just south of where the lava is hitting the ocean. We're talking about an area that is a couple of miles wide, surrounded on 2 sides by molten lava and the Pacific Ocean on the other 2. It is only a voluntary evacuation order in that area because it's not necessarily dangerous to be in there, but it is definitely miserable. There's no power, there's no water, and there's no phone service. And because of the lack of communications, helicopters have been flying over regularly looking for any signs of distress, John.
All right, Scott McLean for us in Hilo. Thanks so much, Scott. 50 years ago today, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot in California. such an indelible moment in history. What would have happened had this moment turned out differently? His one-time speechwriter, Jeff Greenfield, joined. June 5th, 1968, 50 years ago today, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He died a day later. Kennedy had just won the California presidential primary. This was a moment that changed history. Author and journalist Jeff Greenfield worked for Senator Kennedy as a speechwriter, was in the Ambassador Hotel the night of that shooting, and he has a new piece in the Daily Beast, How RFK Could Have Become President. Jeff, it's great to have you here with us. Thanks so much. Before we get to the article, which is like catnip for a political junkie, I just want to ask, what was that moment like to be in the Ambassador Hotel, to be lifted from the heights of the win of the California primary to ultimately what happened?
It was just as you describe it, and it was in an instant. We were gathered on the 5th floor in the living room of his suite, staffers, supporters, just watched him in that ebullient, almost joyous proclamation of victory, and literally within a minute, the television screens shifted to the chaos, and there was this just total stunned, I don't even have the words 50 years later. It was just that moment from joy to complete grief and sorrow.
For so many of us who have grown up after that, looking at these pictures, you sort of live under the assumption, well, Kennedy had just won the California primary. Of course, he was going to go on to Chicago, as he said, and wrap up the Democratic nomination. But this wonderful piece you wrote in the Daily Beast sort of says, not so fast. Remind us of what challenges existed had this horrible event never happened.
Well, you have to go back half a century and realize that the political terrain and the rules were totally different. Most delegates weren't picked in primaries. They were under the control of party leaders or bosses, most of whom in the big states were going to support Vice President Humphrey as they would have supported Lyndon Johnson. That's who they were. And so once California was over, and then a kind of weird primary in New York 2 weeks later, there was no more turf where you could actually win votes. So the question was, how could Robert Kennedy then persuade, push, if you will, or as CBS newsman Roger Mudd put it, squeeze the delegates to move away from their establishment choice and go with Bobby. And the idea was go all over the country, draw enormous crowds, and have them back in their home states tell the Democratic leaders, this is the guy. And the second part was, assuming someone like Chicago Mayor Richard Daley would have endorsed Bobby Kennedy, which seems probable now, he would have been a signal to other leaders, look, we got to pick a guy who can beat Richard Nixon, and Robert Kennedy's that guy. But it would have been tough.
A couple things that you bring up in this article which are so fascinating. Would RFK have ever accepted the #2 slot? Would he have ever run as vice president?
Well, this is something that his de facto campaign manager, Fred Dutton, said to me just a couple of days before the primary. He was somewhat pessimistic about the nomination. He said, well, if he's offered the nomination with Hubert Humphrey, he'll take it. And I said, well, we've been running against this guy and his policies. And Fred Dutton said, look, Bobby's a Roman. He'll go where the power is. That was his point of view. One thing you can sort of speculate, if you want to play this out, is if Robert Kennedy were alive and competing, would Richard Nixon have chosen Spiro Agnew? Mm-hmm. Or would he have chosen someone more like Kennedy, like New York Mayor John Lindsay? I mean, the wheels that keep turning about alternate histories are almost endless.
And you bring up Nixon, but another key player in this would have been Lyndon Baines Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover. Two foes, two just giant political enemies of Robert Kennedy. And you suggest that maybe, just maybe, he would have been able to neutralize them. How?
Well, I devoted a part of a whole book to this where you're able to just do fiction. But it's possible that, maybe the Kennedy forces had information on J. Edgar Hoover in his life that would have been embarrassing to Hoover. Maybe they knew about how Lyndon Johnson became a multimillionaire on the government payroll. But I still think that if you look back on history, and if Robert Kennedy survives, the opposition of a sitting Democratic president and the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, still would have been enormously difficult obstacles to overcome.
Lastly, Jeff, what are the lessons that Robert Kennedy could perhaps teach the Democrats going forward right now? This was a guy who made a famous trip to Appalachia, and yet who was just mobbed wherever he went in the cities.
Yeah, 50 years is a long time to try to tease out the politics, but one thing is clear. even back in '68, the coalition of Democrats, blacks, Hispanics, white working class, was fracturing. Had been going on for years, not just in the South, but in the big cities. And in the last weeks of the campaign, Robert Kennedy was looking very hard for how do you keep the coalition together. He was tilting toward a kind of liberal populist message about rich folks not paying their fair share of taxes. There's no way to know whether he could have held that coalition together. But I think what we saw in 2016, the complete collapse of that coalition, the wholesale desertion of the white working class away from Democrats, is an indication of what Robert Kennedy was trying to say about we've got to heal these divisions. And that lesson, I think, still resonates even across half a century.
Jeff Greenfield, an honor to get to speak to you about this. Thanks so much.
Good luck to you, John.
Appreciate it. Allison?
So does Apple CEO Tim Cook want us all to be addicted to our iPhones or not?
If they're picking up their phone 10 times an hour or 20 times an hour, maybe they could do it less.
That and more in a CNN exclusive next.